Hey, I'm Justin Allison. I'm the discipleship pastor here at Greenwood, and today I want to talk to you a little more about the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, we've been here for I don't know 9 or 10 weeks, and we're looking at the way that God works in this narrative story within the Old Testament, and so we can find some principles for reading and understanding narratives, stories in the Old Testament, and see how those things will apply to our own life. And so that's kind of the purpose for illustrating some of these points as we walk through Esther. But we're also going to be showing how it can affect my life or your life as we look at this text too. So it's not just, in other words, it's not just something that's for seeing a window into the past. It's also for seeing how God works in certain situations and how he will work in our situation as well. And so that's one of the goals that I hope that you'll see from this series on Esther. And I hope that we will gain something unique from reading Esther chapter 9. This really tells us about the rise of this celebration of what's called Purim. It also shows that everything has changed for the Jewish people, for God's people in the overarching story of Esther. And so that's the two things that we're going to be looking at today in this specific chapter 9. So let's look at that now. So on March 7th, the two decrees of the king were put into effect. On that day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but quite the opposite happened. It was the Jews who overpowered their enemies. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the king's provinces to attack anyone who tried to harm them. But no one could make a stand against them, for everyone was afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the highest officers and governors, and the royal officials helped the Jews for fear of Mordecai. For Mordecai had been promoted in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces as he became more and more powerful. So the Jews went ahead on the appointed day and struck down their enemies with the sword. They killed and annihilated their enemies and did as they pleased with those who hated them. So right here, we see, if you will, the fortune of the Jewish people completely reversed. The story set us up earlier to where we were expecting God's people to be annihilated. And now, through what God has done through Mordecai and Esther, God's people get to annihilate their own enemy. That word annihilate, I think, is used because of this, or in the same way that the term Agagite is used here to make us look back at 1 Samuel 15, where the Jewish people were supposed to annihilate a kingdom of Amalekites with a king who was named Agag. And so it looked like this guy was going to be victorious, just like Agag had been spared from annihilation. But then just like in 1 Samuel 15, the prophet takes God's matters into his own hand, literally, and uses a sword to kill Agag. Here, all of the enemies are killed, and the Jewish people plunder their enemies here. That's a pretty graphic way of depicting things. And I'm not suggesting that Christians should do that to their enemies. I don't think that's consistent with the rest of the message of Scripture. So when we look at this here, I think it's best to understand it in terms of God protecting his people and providing for them. And so God has done that. And so we're told after what we just read that there were many people that the Jewish people killed. So that means that many people attacked them, and then many people were killed in fighting for that. And in recounting all of these things to the king, Esther asks for Haman's sons to suffer the same fate as their father, and for the day of being able to fight back to be extended one more day. So that's where we pick up in this story. Verse 14, so the king agreed, and the decree was announced in Susa, and the Jews of Susa gathered together on March 8th. They impaled the bodies of Haman's 10 sons and killed more than 300 men, and again they took no plunder. Meanwhile, the other Jews throughout the king's provinces had gathered together to defend their lives. They gained relief from all their enemies, killing 75,000 of those who hated them. but they did not take any plunder. This was done throughout the provinces. On March 7 and on March 8, they rested, celebrating their victory with a day of feasting and gladness. So you're reading this and you hear that they are celebrating this victory with feasting and gladness. It's not the fact that they killed all of these people that they're celebrating. It seems to be that they're celebrating the way God had delivered them from their enemies. This is something that the Jewish people made into a festival, and we're going to talk about that right now by looking at verse 19. So, to this day, the rural Jews living in a remote village, in remote villages, celebrate an annual festival and holiday on the appointed day in late winter, when they rejoice and send gifts of food to each other. Now, Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to the Jews near and far throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes, calling on them to celebrate an annual festival on these 2 days. He told them to celebrate these days with feasting and gladness, and by giving gifts of food to each other and presents to the poor. This would commemorate a time when the Jews gained relief from their enemies, when their sorrow was turned into gladness and their mourning turned into joy. That is what they are celebrating. The fact that God had done this, turned their sorrow into gladness and their mourning into joy. And so, just like in history past, the Jewish people had celebrated the Passover and what that meant about setting them free from Egypt. And they'd celebrated the Festival of Booths or Tabernacles, where they recounted the ways God had provided for them in the wilderness. Now, there would be a new festival where they were to celebrate how God had reversed things in captivity again. This time he hadn't freed them. But this time, in a new way, God gave them joy and gladness where there was sorrow, and he turned their mourning into joy. And so that is the thing that they are celebrating. And that is something that you and I can celebrate. We look at this story, and I think we're supposed to focus on that turn that God has made, that reversal of the situation, not on the bloodiness, not on the defeating the enemies. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. The main thing for us to focus on is God reversing the situation to benefit his people. And God can and will do that for us today. He can turn sorrows into gladness and mourning into joy. Hopefully you have experienced this with a group of people that you've prayed for. I know in our group Bible study, many years ago, we were praying for a boy who had been born with some heart problems and had to go under for several different surgeries as an infant. And they really didn't know what was going to happen with this kid because of his heart issues. Well, today he's an elementary aged boy running around, jumping on the furniture, doing all the boy things that you want boys to do. And that's turning sorrow into joy. He took a situation where it looked like things were not going to go well. Things weren't going to end well, and God turned that into great joy. But at the same time, he doesn't always choose to do that. I certainly can think of situations where I've prayed for my own brother to be healed from his condition of epilepsy, and God hasn't chosen to do that yet. And so God used that situation in a different way. But ultimately, we know that we look forward to a place where there will be no weeping, there will be no sorrow. God will be in control ultimately and in every detail. I'm excited that I won't have arthritis in my wrist anymore. Like all of these little things that are signs of the present world of sorrow and mourning and suffering, all of that will be gone. That's a hope for the future, but he also gives us a hope for the present that he can do this in our life. He can take things that are hard, that are difficult, and use those things to bring about good in our life. Maybe it's a job situation, or maybe it's a family situation that looks bad. We're going to pray about that. We're going to bring that before the Lord because we know that he is powerful and that he can change those circumstances. Doesn't mean that he always will, but we go to him and we plead with him just the same way that Esther went before the king here and pleaded with him, just the way that she received that word from the Lord, giving her a vision of what to do in that circumstance. You and I can do the same thing in our own circumstances, wherever we are right here in Parker County in the 21st century. So I hope that that helps you out. I hope that that gives you some food for thought and a little bit of energy in your circumstances, whatever they may be. I'd love to talk to you some more about that sometime if you want. You can email me, jallison@greenwoodbc.com, or you can come find me at the information desk on Sunday between the services. I'll see you later.